All right, so we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today. Diddy.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, you've been following his career a while, but this indictment on federal charges, this is different.
It really is. And what's so fascinating to me is how this case could really expose a lot about the music industry. I mean, this isn't about some celebrity getting a DUI.
Right.
This is a glimpse into how power, real power, plays out. And the potential for exploitation that comes with it.
Okay, so let's break this down for our listeners. We're talking sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy. Those are not your average celebrity scandal headlines.
Right, these are serious charges, and they suggest something much bigger is going on.
So when we hear racketeering, it's not a word we use every day. What does that even mean in this context?
So racketeering, this is often linked to organized crime, like a pattern of illegal activity. In Diddy's case, they're saying he was using coercion, abuse, all to make money to keep his power.
And then there are these freak-offs that are mentioned in the indictment. Like, what even is that?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a new brand name anytime soon. But essentially, these were events, parties that Diddy allegedly put together. And the allegations are that these were predatory. Women were drugged, threatened, even lured with promises of career help, all using his position to exploit them.
And it's not just talk. They've got a lot of evidence. I mean, over 50 people have been interviewed, right? Victims, witnesses.
Yeah, and it goes beyond that. We're talking over 300 grand jury subpoenas. That means they're demanding documents, testimony from a huge network of people. And get this, 90 phones. They confiscated 90 phones and devices, even a whole surveillance system. This is a serious investigation.
90 phones, that's wild. It makes you think about what's on those phones, what they might find.
Yeah, and we're not even getting into the physical evidence they found during those raids.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy. They found 3 AR-15s, and the serial numbers were scratched off. And they found over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant.
Right, and while those things alone don't prove anything, it's pretty unsettling when you think about the accusations.
Okay, so Diddy's lawyers, unsurprisingly, they're fighting back hard on this, calling the claims sickening, saying it's all about money.
Yeah, Diddy himself even put out a statement where he called these attempts to extort money from him and said he's going to fight for my name, my family, and for the truth. But here's the thing. The prosecution is claiming there's more to it than just denying. They're saying Diddy has a history of obstructing justice, like trying to pay off witnesses.
And then there's that incident back in 2016. The hotel surveillance footage of Diddy attacking his then-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura.
Oh, right.
I mean, punching, kicking, dragging her. It's hard to watch.
It is. And while they seem to deal with that at the time, they're bringing it up again now because it could support this pattern of violence that the prosecution is alleging.
It's just wild because this isn't even the first time Diddy's been in legal trouble.
Right.
We need to talk about those earlier lawsuits. I mean, they go way back. And they paint a really different picture of the guy.
Right. And what's interesting now is you see these past accusations, some going back decades, through the lens of this indictment. They don't seem like isolated incidents anymore, you know? They start to look like they're part of a bigger pattern.
Yeah, and these aren't just random people making accusations. We're talking about Cassie Ventura, who was with him for years. She filed a lawsuit alleging abuse, even trafficking, and rape.
And then you have Derek Lee Cardello Smith. He was actually in prison at the time. He claims that Diddy drugged and assaulted him at a party back in '97. He even ended up winning a $100 million default judgment against him.
$100 million, wow. Then there's Lil Rod Jones, who's a music producer. He says Diddy pressured him into having sex with sex workers and threatened him for over a year.
And we can't forget about Dawn Richard. She was in a band with Diddy. And in her lawsuit, she describes years of physical and sexual abuse. She says he was controlling, manipulative, using his power to keep her quiet.
It's like every time you turn around, there's another voice, another accusation. And these are people who are in his inner circle, you know, in his world. You can't just brush that off.
No, you can't. And the fact that it's spread out over decades,
Yeah.
that it involves so many different points in his life, his career, it creates a picture that's really hard to ignore.
Okay, but before we get too deep into all that, I do want to bring up one more thing, because it adds another layer to Diddy's history of, well, aggression.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of a guy named D. Gilmore?
Yeah, I think so. He's a writer, right? Writes about the music industry. I feel like I've heard that name.
Yeah, he's written some pretty interesting stuff about what really goes on behind the scenes. But anyway, Gilmore says he had this run-in with Diddy back in the 90s. And it sounds pretty scary. They had some kind of disagreement at a nightclub in Manhattan, and Gilmore says Diddy and his whole entourage chased him through the streets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it gets crazier. He even says they fired a gun at him.
Whoa. Okay, now that's a whole other level. We do have to remember, though, this is just one person's account.
Right.
It hasn't been proven in court or anything, but it definitely makes you think about everything else we're talking about with Diddy's temper, his history, and honestly, it fits with what we know about the whole vibe of the 90s music scene. Things could get pretty intense.
Totally. And there's one more detail about this whole Gilmore thing that just adds this whole other layer. So, that night, Gilmore says he was wearing a Death Row Records shirt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Are you kidding? Wearing those colors back then during the whole West Coast rivalry?
Yeah.
It's like he was waving a red flag in front of a bull.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's not proof that Diddy did anything, but it definitely adds to the picture. You know, this wasn't just a random guy on the street. He was practically asking for trouble, at least in that world. And when you combine it with everything else, the lawsuits, the accusations, the evidence, it's hard to just brush it all off. You know what I mean? It really makes you wonder, how has Diddy been able to do this for so long? How has he managed to avoid serious consequences?
Yeah, that is the big question. And I think it goes beyond Diddy himself, honestly, because what we're really talking about are these systems, these structures that allow powerful people to operate this way. And not just in music, right? We see it everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Hollywood, politics, tech, it's everywhere. But this case with Diddy, it really exposes how these industries protect their own. You know, they care more about making money, protecting their reputations, than they do about the people who get hurt along the way.
Yeah. And that's the part that's really disheartening.
Totally. It's like we've become numb to it. We see these stories, we hear these accusations, but nothing really changes.
Well, and we're kind of complicit too, right? We love the music, the lifestyle, the image that these artists create. And sometimes it's easier to just look the other way.
That's true. But this time it feels different, doesn't it? Like we can't just ignore this.
Yeah, this one feels different. And a lot of that is because of the sheer volume of accusations, the evidence, and the fact that Diddy's defense seems to be all about discrediting these people, saying they're just trying to get money from him.
Which is such a common tactic.
It is. And it often works.
Right.
But when you have multiple people coming forward separately, telling similar stories with incredible detail, it's hard to just write them all off as liars.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so important, I think, because it forces us to really confront these issues head on and to ask ourselves some tough questions about how we got here and what we're going to do about it.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest questions for me is, what are the consequences going to be? If Diddy's found guilty of even some of these charges, we're talking serious jail time. Like decades.
Right. I mean, sex trafficking alone has a mandatory minimum of 15 years.
Exactly. And then you add on the racketeering conspiracy, that could be another 20 years, maybe more. Not to mention what it would do to his finances, his companies, his whole brand.
Yeah, it's huge. And it really makes you wonder, is this the case that finally holds him accountable? Or will he find a way to slip through the cracks again?
Right, like will power and money prevail? Or will justice actually be served?
Yeah. This is a big one. It's bigger than just Diddy.
Oh, for sure. This case has implications for the entire music industry. It's a wake-up call. And it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out.
You know, it's funny. As we've been going through all of this, what really gets me is just how many accusations there are. Like, it's not just one person, one lawsuit.
Right.
It's this pattern going back years, decades even.
It really is. I mean, this case has brought to light what a lot of people have suspected about the music industry for a long time. You know, that there's this underbelly, this culture of using power and fame to take advantage of people. And it's not just music, obviously.
It happens everywhere.
But we're seeing it play out right in front of us with this case.
It's like we put these music moguls, these artists, on a pedestal. We want to believe the best about them. But sometimes, maybe we're looking the other way, you know, ignoring the signs.
100%. And it's hard. Right. We love the music, we're entertained, it's easier to just not think about it too much. But it seems like with this Diddy case, we kind of have to think about it.
We do. So to be fair, Diddy and his lawyers, their whole defense seems to be that these women are lying, that they're just trying to get rich off of him.
Which, I mean, is a classic move, right? It's the go-to defense in these situations. And sometimes it works, honestly. But when you have this many different people all saying basically the same thing, all these detailed stories, and they don't know each other, It's pretty hard to believe they're all making it up.
Right. It makes you think about how difficult it must be for someone to come forward in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, could you imagine going up against someone like Diddy with all his money and power, knowing everyone's going to question you, your motives, everything?
Yeah. And knowing the music industry itself might turn on you.
Exactly. That's the thing a lot of people don't realize. It's not just the abuser you're up against. It's the whole system that protects them.
It's really disheartening. So then the question is, what do we do about it? How do we even start to fix a problem like this?
Honestly, I don't have all the answers, but I think step one is believing survivors, making it clear that they will be heard and supported. And then we need to hold these powerful people accountable, not just legally, but socially, professionally. They need to know that this behavior won't be tolerated.
And it comes down to us too, right? As consumers, as fans, we have to stop separating the art from the artist.
Yeah. We have to decide what we're willing to support with our wallets, with our attention. It's about making conscious choices.
This whole conversation has been really heavy,
Yeah, it has.
but really important. So thank you for breaking all of this down with me, for sharing your insights. It's been eye-opening, for sure.
Of course. Glad to be here. It's
Yeah.
important to have these conversations, even when they're difficult.
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We covered a lot today, but it's not over. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep having those uncomfortable conversations,
Maybe.
because that's how things start to change.